So I am here today to talk to you about nonprofit dashboards. And so as you're trying to do all the things, and maybe I'll make a couple of comments. We work with a lot of nonprofits at BKD, and I think, Trish, you made a comment about people have money. They're just kind of hanging on to it a little tighter right now. But there is still, funds out there. And I do think as we move into 21, it's not helpful now, but I think down the road, I think some of the giving and things like that will continue or come back. But I do think people are kind of just hanging on. Just it's such a roller coaster right now. They're not quite sure what's happening. And so being a little more cautious with giving and their dollars and things like that at the current moment. So let me know, is the slide sharing on the screen okay for everyone? Someone get, all right, perfect, got a thumbs up, perfect. So we're gonna go over a few different things today. We're gonna talk about some definitions, about dashboard, KPIs, metrics, some of the benefits of good dashboard, how do you decide what to measure, some basic principles of good dashboard design, some different types of dashboards, and I'll even show you a few different examples, kind of some fictional type data stuff, and then also give you some resources. So there's a few good books and resources that I think are helpful too, and so I've got that information. And when we're done today, I'll send Trish the slides in a PDF, and then she can share that with the group. And then I believe we are also recording, and we'll share that with Trish afterwards as well. So we'll get started. First, I want to ask, how many of you are actually using dashboards? So if you can kind of maybe raise your hand, we use dashboards, or at least have seen them, somewhat take a look at them. A few of you have doing some of that. Okay. So it's overwhelming, and I think it's sort of this, I don't know, unicorn thing, and people are like, a dashboard. So that sounds cool, but I don't really know what it is. And so I think that's a common thing. And so hopefully we can demystify a little bit some of that. But basically we want to talk about is something that's a visual display, should be somewhat easy to read and follow. It shouldn't be like Greek when you're trying to figure it out. Organized in a fashion that makes sense so you can follow things, and it's really something that's understandable so that you understand, are we meeting our objectives? What are the things that can help us meet our objectives? How do we stack up to our goals? Those are some of the types of things that you should typically see on a dashboard. They also might include some things like key performance indicators. And so those are typically quantifiable measures that you use to kind of gauge your performance. And so it's not the feel-good stuff. It's hard facts and statistics, and some of those types of things. And then you might also have some metrics. And so also quantitative type assessment, maybe where do we stack up to budget, or do we stack up to other goals, or industry or benchmarks or things like that. And those are some of the other things that might be included as well. So what are some of the great benefits of having a dashboard? Visibility is first of all. So basically putting it out there, making it easy for people so they don't have to page through a 35-page board packet and understand what's going on. They can go to the dashboard and they can see the big important things right on the top of it. That's super important. Also wanting to see those kind of ongoing improvements. So again, how are we stacking up? How are things going? Are we progressing towards where we want to go? The time savings. So kind of going back to, I don't have to page through 35 pages of a board packet to find out what I need to know. It's there on the dashboard and I can see it. The more detailed stuff then maybe if I want to dig in is what's in my board packet, or for management, some kind of reporting package that they get. Also has kind of those performance checks and balances. So looking at business plans, objectives, do we want to serve so many families? Do we have a certain number of meals we want to provide every month? Do we have a certain number of classes we want to hold? Throw COVID out the window, but and get back to doing the in-person thing. Obviously that's created a lot of change. And there's probably had to be, I'm not going to use the word pivot, we've had to rethink how we deliver and how we meet our mission. And so you know, those performance goals, things that you did for budget for this year looked a lot different 9 months ago. And so have we had to make changes? And with that, that dashboard should change too. Those goals and objectives on that dashboard should change, and how we're stacking up against them and measuring up. And then continuously up-to-date progress evaluation. So again, so you can go in there, check, see how things are going. The one thing you don't want your dashboard to be is stale. So it's important that it's something that is updated with relative frequency. Exactly how frequent is up to the organization. I would say at least once a month, you would want to do that. Sometimes, depending on systems and what you have available, it can be live in some respects. Some financial data, maybe not as much, but some of the other things, like each week logging all the activities of the week. So whether that's classes, or how many books were checked out, or how many people came through the door, or, you know, different things like that. Those things can maybe be more real time. So those are all good things to kind of keep an eye on. So we talk about all that. So how do you figure out what the heck do we even want to measure? So from this book by Lawrence Butler, The Nonprofit Dashboard, there's some really good information, and he brings out 6 approaches to defining dashboard metrics that have proven to be pretty useful. So these are by no means like this is the only way to do it, but these are some really good places to start if you're trying to figure out, well, what should we have on our dashboard? And so that book is a great one, and I do have it listed in the resources as well. It's actually available online in a digital edition. I think for like $50 you can download it, and it's about 100 pages or so, so there's some really good information in there. But one of the things to think about is your outcomes. What are you trying to achieve? What is it that you're trying to do as an organization? What is, and then it kind of goes back into the next one, using your mission as a spine. So deciding, what is our mission? What is it that matters? What is it that we're trying to do? And using those types of things. And then what are the things that are going to make or break us as we try to achieve that? So if we don't have 100 people come through the door, does that mean we're not meeting our mission? If that's the case, we should probably track that. If our mission is to provide reading materials, such as the library, to our users, that's probably something we should keep track of. How many books are being checked out? That's an important measure. Are we fulfilling our mission? If we only check out 100 books a week, is that enough? And you have to decide, is that enough? If we're doing 1,000 books a week, is that enough? Maybe that's not enough either. You have to kind of, and if you don't track it, you don't know. And so having that information, and then also comparing that or finding places to benchmark that against and see if you can find organizations that do similar things to you, and what are those things that they track, and how do you stack up compared to them. That can be helpful too. No 2 organizations are exactly alike, but there are also similarities, and it's good, I think, to sometimes measure yourself against someone else in the right way. And so you have to be careful when you do that, but I think those sometimes can be good things to keep you a little bit honest and make sure that you know, we're doing great things, but we never get better if we don't push ourselves out of our comfort zone. And so it's always good to be trying to push yourself out of that comfort zone. And that's where maybe looking at others and doing some comparisons can help you do that. Also thinking about your strategic mission. So again, kind of the what's going to make or break the mission? How do we really dig into this? And what is this like strategy going to be behind how we accomplish this? Like, what are the specific programs? What are the outputs that we're going to achieve? The specific activities? What kind of inputs do we need to make that happen? Looking at all of those types of things. Drivers of success, of course, those KPIs. So that's where you get into those key performance indicators. So looking at those quantifiable measures and seeing how they meet your objectives and goals. And then also looking at risk factors. I think this is something that's potentially overlooked quite a bit, but what could get in your way? What could stop you? Now, nobody could predict COVID, right? Like, this is just a whole thing that just nobody even anticipated, but you also have to think about other things that could get in your way. So if you're trying to plan a large event, you should probably be mindful about what else is going on in the community. And as a risk factor, you planning something on a certain day, and if that's maybe the same weekend as Iowa and Iowa State both playing a home football game, is there going to be very many people in Des Moines that are going to come attend your event? Just because those things tend to draw a lot of people, even if they don't, under normal circumstances, don't have tickets to the game. They may go tailgate, they may go do things, they go out of town. Or if there's another large event like the Arts Festival or the State Fair or different things like that, is that a good opportunity to leverage when there's more people in town, and maybe then your event can have more participants? Those are the types of things that I think you need to look at. If we decide to have this big outdoor event, what's the risk factor of the weather? Well, we have to think about that. We live in Iowa, who knows? It can snow one day and 75 degrees 2 days later. So what's our backup plan? What are our alternatives? Do we have any? Have we thought that through? So those risk factors, I think, are things that need to be at least considered. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in the mission and the excitement, and we're really pumped about doing something, we forget to think about the what ifs. And so it's important to remember the what ifs, and that includes what's on your dashboard and how we would respond should this happen. Similar to, do we have enough endowment to make it if we don't get enough donations, if we don't get enough contributions to meet budget? Is there an endowment sitting there to help, or a reserve to help us get through? So those are things to think about as well. And then the services and resources. So looking at what are we providing both internally, so are we keeping our people that are helping us, do they have the right supplies, the materials, the training, the education necessary? Are we doing the right programming? And then when you look at the public benefit and what you're trying to achieve, then are we providing those resources? Do we have the right tools out there? Are we doing the right activities? So lots of different things. No one perfect mix of any of this, but all good things to consider. So when we look at measuring operating results, there's 3 basic types for nonprofits. So looking at your impact measures. So basically, how are we getting to that objective and mission of the organization? The activities, so that's more your day-to-day effectiveness of the staff. How are we doing? And then you look at capacity, so much like more around funding, fundraising, resources. So that might be where you look and say, okay, how much are we spending on fundraising, and how much are we getting in contributions? So how much does it cost us for every contributed dollar that we get when we look at the fundraising? That's, I think, a pretty important if you're focused on being funded by contributions. When you're doing a little more towards grants, or maybe even some service for a smaller fee, that's helped out by contributions to help reduce the cost of it, then it looks a little different, but I still think those are good things to take a look at. Also, your staff effectiveness, so how you're providing services, activities, how much does it cost you for the program, and what do you think the benefit is that's being provided? Those are good things to take a look at as well. There's kind of 2 different types of metrics that you can look at. There's leading and then there's lagging. So leading indicators are more about economics and performance, and they help you get out ahead of things. They look at what's coming. And so looking at, are we on track? Can we make pivots? Should we make changes? And lagging are more about historical performance. So I'm an auditor, but I'll be honest, financial statements are lagging. It's always after the fact. It's already after it's already done. There's good information to be gained there, but I think if you wait and once a year look at those financials and don't look throughout the year and see how you're progressing and how you're stacking up to your budgets and your goals, then I think you're not using them as wisely as you could be. The other thing I think is the budget to actuals. I think budgets are important, and I know that's tricky as a nonprofit because you may be relying on outside sources, but at the same time, it's still good to set a budget. And even if you're a new, young nonprofit, I think it's still great to say, here's what our goals are. So if we want to meet these goals, what does a budget look like? And then you can at least track and see how you're coming along. And maybe it looks terrible that first year, that 2 years, 3 years, but you learn as you go and you get better, and then you can adapt and change that budget as you need to. Or it can make you pivot. I said I wasn't going to say pivot, but it can make you look for alternatives and be flexible in where your resources and how you look for funding. Do you try to go find different grants? Do you work with community foundation? Do you go to United Way? Do you look for federal grants potentially? There's a lot of stuff out there with CARES Act funds and a lot of different things. And I know you guys are really good about staying on top of that as a group, but those are all different resources. There's a lot of state grants and things out there too. So always good things to go check out and look for. So again, as much as as an auditor, financials are lagging. So it's more, you got to use them all through the year. We got to see how are they stacking up to budget? How are they, stacking up to our goals as we look ahead. So a couple of specific examples of a leading indicator would be, okay, how many grant applications were submitted? How many donor meetings do we have scheduled every week? So if you depend heavily on contributions, your fundraising team, how often are they meeting with donors? I know that's really hard right now, but Zoom calls or I know everyone's got Zoom fatigue. I'm feeling you on that one too. And I'm a social person, so I love to be out in person. So I would much rather see you all face to face than be able to do this with you. But I've had to learn and adapt and be flexible. And so learning to do this on video, but so those are good things to think about. And how are we getting out there? What are we proactively doing? And then the lagging indicators are more like, okay, well, after the fact, how many dollars did we raise? How much did it cost for every dollar that we raised? What is our net profit and loss? What's our cash balance? Some of those types of things. So some financial things that you can use as more leading is looking ahead, saying, well, here's our cash on hand today, here's our budgeted expenditures, and here's our budgeted contributions. How are we tracking? And are we going to have enough cash to be there at the end of the year where we want to be so that we can keep moving forward? That's a way to turn a financial thing into more of a leading rather than a lagging. So when do you choose? When do you decide what we're going to use? Leading tends to be a little bit more of an internal use type thing. That way you have time to make the changes. You can be flexible. You can say, you know what, we're going to reevaluate what we're doing, and maybe we need to make some changes to our approach. Maybe we need to step it up in a certain area, or maybe we're knocking it out of the park and we can take that and whatever we've learned and doing really well there and apply that to the next program. And so that maybe isn't doing as well. So it gives you an opportunity to evaluate those things and take a look and see, how you can make those changes. The lagging is more about that monthly financial reporting, a little bit more at the executive or even the board level sometimes as they're making decisions about how to move forward. So a little bit less of the day-to-day type things and more of the less frequent type things. So what are some characteristics of effective measurements? We can measure the heck out of everything, but does it mean anything? That's really what's important. So one, it needs to be specific. It has to be clear, well-defined, easily understood. We shouldn't need a degree in data analytics or economics to understand the metrics that are being shown. If that's what's necessary, it's probably not a good metric and it's not a good measure. It also has to be measurable, so quantifiable. So feel-good stuff's great, but we want to be able to measure facts and statistics. That's what helps your donors understand the impact that you have in the community and the organization, is when you have statistics and facts that can support what you've done with their dollars to feel that they're having an impact. And so that's always really important. But it can't be this ginormous exercise that's super expensive and takes a ton of time to get. So you have to think about what's effective, what's easily obtained or relatively easily obtained and easy to understand. And then of course you have to link it to your goals. So the things kind of, they have to go hand in hand. Also thinking about achievable. There's the pie in the sky goals and then there's the realistic goals. And I think it's good to have both. You got to have those stretch goals. You got to have those things. We call them BHAGs here at BKD, the big, hairy, audacious goal. It sounds kind of funny, but it's fun, right? You got to have a little fun with it. And we always have a few of those out there because it's important. That's what stretches us. That's what helps us grow. That's what helps us be better. You can't ever be great if you don't think great. And so you got to have those big goals out there. But you also need to think about what are the stepping stones. So I usually say you might have that giant goal, but there's probably 15 goals you can hit that will help you get to that BHAG. And so think about, okay, well, here's the big one. Let's find the 15 to get me there. And so that's the stuff I think is really important in between. And that's where the achievable piece comes in. And then, of course, timely. So we have to make sure that the metrics are timely. We can't find out that we're way under budget 6 months after. Like, the data can't be 6 months old when we're looking at it. That gives us no time. We're already too far gone to do anything about that. We need to know about that more currently so that we can make those adjustments and move forward. So timely is really important too. So giving you all this stuff, right? So how do you select? How do you make the choices? I think going back to mission is always a great place to start. Just that's really what you're all about. It's the feel good. It's what gives you the warm fuzzy. So let's start there and find the goals that can help us hit that. And that, I think, will be great metrics to help you move forward. Also, short-term, long-term objectives. I think, again, it's good to think about the now, but you need to think about the future too. So it's always important to have those kind of more long-term goals sitting out there. And so then what are the metrics and the key performance indicators that will help us hit that long-term goal? And then also maybe the short-term stuff. So kind of what I was just saying about the big, hairy, audacious goal sitting out here. What are the 15 little goals that'll get us there? Think about that. Also, different strategies, different methods you're going to use, operating plans, programs, activities. Think about that. Are we going to offer educational courses? Are we going to bring people in to talk to us? Do we need to get certain volunteers? Do we need to have people with a certain skill set? All those types of things need to be thought about. Also, what's going to mean the most? If you see some kind of measure or metric and you look at it and you're like, yeah, so that's not a good one. You need to think about it and look at it and say, okay, that means something to me. I feel like that actually means we're doing what we said we were going to do. That's a good goal then. That's a good metric. That's something that's good and you should look at it all the time. And then again, quantifying the results of the programs and activities, measurement of operations. So all things that are important that you really need to look at. So going through there, I still think mission is at the heart of it all. And so that's a great one to start with. So good dashboard design. Let me catch up to my notes here. All right, so that book that I referenced earlier goes into deep dive on all of these into specific items. So I'm going to just talk a little bit high level about them. So basically, one, tailored to your needs. So make it relevant. So if you see something at another organization and you're like, wow, I really like that, but they don't do anything close to what you do, then that's not a good dashboard for you. So just because it was awesome for them does not make it awesome for you. You have to look at what's specific to your organization. So the consistent formats make it easy to understand. Don't get something so busy and full and crazy that nobody can understand it. Priority structuring. So first things first, remember what's really important should be at the top. It should not be buried at the bottom of the page or somewhere in the midst of a whole bunch of jumbled stuff. Put the big important stuff at the top. And I like to think of it as prioritized. So the less important it is, the lower it goes on the page. It still might be important, but these other things are more important. Comparative context, I think, is really important. So compared to what? So you have to determine, what are we going to measure ourselves against? Are we going to measure ourselves against what we were a year ago? Are we going to measure ourselves against another similar organization? Are we going to measure ourselves against maybe some of the Charity Navigator or Guide Star information that's out there and available? What are we going to measure ourselves against? And that's an important thing too. Budget, that might be another one. Brief explanations, and I emphasize brief. I'm a talker and I like to say lots of things about facts and statistics, and when I give board presentations, I got to remember to the point. But it's because I get so involved in it and I actually truly love what I do that I get a little talky. But it's important to be brief, to the point. A dashboard isn't everything. If they want to know more, that's where they can go to the underlying supporting data that is a little bit more expanded, has more details, and that you can really dig in. The narrative journeys, what's the story? I think a little bit of that needs to be there. So maybe whether we start with the mission statement or, why are we looking at this metric? But again, you have to be somewhat brief. You can't go crazy. and understand, what is this telling me? That's important too. And then graphics. I think graphics are important. It shouldn't be all pictures, but who doesn't love seeing something in a pie chart versus a narrative where it's written out or just a list of numbers, right? So that makes things a little more friendly, a little easier to use, but also be thoughtful about how you use them. Don't make it a whole page of pie charts and then there's no good explanations, then nobody knows what that means. So that's helpful as well. So what are some common mistakes? Just too complex, way too much stuff. Incorrect metrics. People aren't using the right data. They're not using the right calculations. Doing too much at once. It's okay if you don't use any dashboards today and you want to start a dashboard, pick 4 things to get you started. You don't have to build this huge complex thing. As you work together, you will determine, hey, you know what? That one I don't like so much, but could we add this? And then you can evolve and change and grow. I don't think the dashboard should be something that we create and that we never change for 10 years. I think that's a mistake because your organization will never look the same in 10 years as it does today. The saying constantly goes, the pace of change will never be as slow as it is today. And I think that's true. And because of that, there'll be new ways to measure data. There'll be new ways to do comparisons and benchmarks and to look at things. There'll be new ways to do reporting and create dashboards. And so I think it's important to always keep it fresh and evolving. Inappropriate visuals, like I mentioned before, don't go crazy with graphics. Graphics are good, but don't throw in a little picture of something just because, make sure it means something. And then too much or too little interactivity. So it's nice sometimes, some dashboards have where if you can click on something, then it'll take you into some more detailed information. It'll expand and open up and show you other information, whether that's just through Excel, through a link to another page, things of that nature. So that can be good, but you don't want to go crazy with that, and then it becomes complex and people don't know how to get back, and then it's kind of like, oh boy, I don't know. So important to make sure that you look at that as well. Again, always looking at constant evaluation. So again, don't let it get stale. So some different types of dashboards. A management dashboard is a good place to start. So more about, as it says, may otherwise be seen as dry by non-financially savvy board members. So it's really like the nuts and bolts. It's the looking at cash, and I'll talk about it in a minute. Key data points. So it's really meant for the management of the organization. And so things like days cash on hand, like, do we have the money to pay the bills? Are we gonna, do we have enough cash coming in? What are our unrestricted contributions? So what are those contributions that we can just spend how we need to spend and not necessarily tied to a specific program, purpose, event, that type of thing. Contributed income to budget. So how are we doing as compared to budget? So we know if we're tracking, because we budgeted for certain expenditures based on programs and things we think we need to do. But if we're not getting enough contributions, do we have to alter those plans? Your projected year-end cash. So as I mentioned, looking at, how things are trending, and then what's our cash look like. And then when we get to the end of the year, are we going to have the cash we need? The month's operating reserve. So I mentioned endowment previously. Looking at what do we have in our reserves if everything kind of drops off. So I'm sure you've all been tested by that significantly in the last few months. Looking at, some organizations are faring really well and seeing lots of great contributions, and they're still seeing, some have actually seen an increase in giving, which has been remarkable. I think some of that's just been depending on the type of organization that you are, your donor base, and some of those types of things will really affect that. I've seen both. I've seen organizations where things are still continuously looking good, and then I've seen others where things have really been cut back. So it just kind of depends on the type of the organization. And then looking at your current ratio, so your current assets to your current liabilities. And that generally is an indicator of, do we have enough assets that are liquid enough that we can pay all the bills that'll be coming up in the next year? And that's typically what that'll do. So A current ratio, of over 1 or higher is a good thing. If it's less than 1, that means you don't have enough liquid assets to pay for those liabilities. And so you're going to need to think about, do we have longer term assets that we can convert? Do we have a way to bring in additional contributions to help make up the shortfall? Do we have to dip into the endowment? Things like that. So here's a graphic of a dashboard example. So looking at fundraising efficiency, program efficiency, operating reliance. So that's where I was mentioning kind of looking at the sustainability. So do we have enough cash and funds? Looking at some basic performance cards to the right there. So that fund efficiency, what is our fundraising contributions as compared to the prior year? How are we tracking? Our program efficiency, our investment dollars, looking at what do we have invested and out there? What is our operating revenue? So different things like that. This is no one perfect answer. This is just one way it could be done, but I think provides a nice example. We also have, this one's a little bit different, so focusing more on kind of the pie chart world, right? And so looking at program income, so looking at your different types of program and how your income comes in, looking at expenses. And this one they show within a specific entity, and then they look at consolidated and looking at it that way. So if you have multiple organizations that consolidate together in your financials, maybe this is a way to break it down. Couple different approaches you can take there. We also have measurement dashboards. So looking more on internal goals, mission, financial performance, different things. So there's a little bit, and then there's kind of subsets under here. So we can look at fund development. So how many new grants have we funded? How many dollars have we raised? We can look at it from a human resources perspective and say, well, have we retained our staff? Or do we have a lot of turnover? Well, turnover is expensive. You have to train people, you have to onboard them, you have to make sure that they understand policies, procedures, how you're going to go through and do things. Depending on the types of services that you may provide, you may have DHS to contend with, and they have certain requirements. And so for training and background checks and all these other things that you have to do. So it's important to look at that. Professional development might be also a great human resources stat to consider, especially if you're providing specialized services, making sure those folks are getting trained. Looking at board and governance type items, so percent of board members giving. You've got these great board members, but are they all contributing to the organization and helping continue the mission? A lot of the nonprofits we work with have a policy that if you're on the board, there's a certain level of giving required. Not everyone does that, but I do see that quite a bit. And then requiring attendance at board meetings if they want to be on the board. It's if they're going to say they're on the board, but then they never come to a board meeting, is that really effective? And is that someone you really want to be able to say that they're on your board, but they don't really participate? So there's usually some kind of policy involved for attendance at board meetings as well. And so keeping an eye on that and tracking that information. Looking at programs, so then if you focus on more of a program type organization, how many outreach presentations, maybe number of students served, number of books lended, children in your facility on a regular basis, whatever that is, but those are the different types of things you can look at there. Some other things in the finance world, days cash on hand, revenues and expenses that are within 10% of budget or more. The more ones are the problem. Within the 10%, that's a good thing. Marketing. I don't know if some of you are a little bigger than others, but if you have specific marketing folks, tracking how many daily website visits you get, your newsletter subscribers, tracking clicks and emails if you send emails through a system that you can track that information. Looking at volunteer management. So are you tracking your volunteer hours? Even though that's not something that actually hits the financials, that's good information to share. When I go volunteer at Dress for Success, I log in, I write down on a sheet and I log my time so that at the end of the year, they can say they've had X amount of hours donated and contributed by those of us that help with the organization. So we do that, as well as that number of volunteers. If you're more of a membership organization, tracking the number of new members and then how many are recurring and keep signing up every year, that kind of thing. So the member retention, that's important as well, because you don't want someone to join for just a year and then leave. So here's another example of a little bit more visual dashboard. This one is more about a museum kind of idea. So kind of lends to the library a little bit, but looking at memberships, looking at their endowment, you know, what are the new works of art they have on view? So maybe what are the new things that have come in, how many visitors they've had. They also look at energy consumption because that's a big maybe expense that they have, different attendance at different things, visits, entrances, just all kinds of different things. So this is another example of a dashboard that can be used, a little bit of visual, but quantifiable, measurable items that can be looked at. So this one's a little bit more around the fund development. And so looking at the average gift amount, donor giving, number of gifts per donor, net per active donor, and then looking at campaigns. So looking at how much you've received in contributions by your various campaigns. Not everyone does that, but obviously every organization does something a little bit different. So if you do have a specific campaign, then you can see maybe what was successful or what wasn't as successful, and maybe model the things that turned out well. Looking at major donors set by some kind of threshold that you have, and then knowing that your development team then needs to focus on those major donors and make sure that they're maintaining good contact, that they're keeping them informed, sharing information, keeping them engaged so that they continue to fund your mission. So I think we're winding down here, and I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions, but so kind of some of the follow-up things to think about or key takeaways is, you know, if you're having a dashboard or if you're going to build one, what purpose is it serving? Who is that target audience? Who are you trying to reach? And as I showed you, there's, you know, you can have 6 different dashboards and they all have a different audience, but it just depends but you need to think about that as you design it. What exactly are we measuring? Big one I like to remember and focus on too is who's accountable. Who is going to be the one responsible for monitoring all the different things that you want to measure and then reporting that information so it can be put in the dashboard. Because it's great if you build this beautiful dashboard, but then if no one has the responsibility or has been identified as taking ownership of the things that go into the dashboard, then you might as well not have a dashboard. Do we have the measures that are clearly defined? So have we been specific about what it is we want to measure and how we want to measure it? Does our dashboard give us a full picture? Is it just one thing? And if you're just starting from scratch, maybe it is not the full picture yet because you're still kind of figuring it out. That's fine. Continue to grow, continue to develop, figure out what are we missing that gives us the full picture, and that'll be helpful as well. And then when you look at that dashboard, what should be your key takeaways? So once you build it, kind of get it looking at it, you're thinking, okay, well, what do I want people to take away from this? And if your vision is this, and you ask someone to look at it and they don't tell you those things, that means your dashboard's not effective and you should probably go back and take a second look. Or ask them, here's what I wanted you to see, what would help you see that information better, and get their feedback so that you can make the necessary changes. So a few resources, I mentioned that Nonprofit Dashboard by Lawrence Butler. That's a great book, really good information. Compass Point is where some of those sample dashboard indicators came from, so some good information there. There's a nonprofit quarterly article about the matrix map. That's also a good one. And then another good one is nonprofit sustainability. So some great information there you can check out if you're really wanting to dive deep into the dashboards and take a good hard look at what you've got and what you're doing, and if you're trying to build something from scratch. So as I mentioned, I'll provide the slides to Trish to send out to everybody, but with that, we can open it up for questions. I will stop sharing. And if you don't want to talk out loud, I can look into the chat too if you want to.
Jessica, thank you so much. This is very helpful. I've seen other presentations where it's really a company that's wanting to sell software that we aren't able to afford. And so I just wanted to say kudos for giving a really good comprehensive look at dashboards and helping me to see where we fall short maybe and what we're providing and ideas for, you know, making ours more effective maybe. So I just wanted to give you a big kudos. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, anytime you talk with us, and we do lots of things like this, but our goal is not selling, it's just helping. And so we just want to make sure you have good information to work with, and that, you know, if you want to reach out for more questions later, great. But I just want to make sure that you've got, you know, good information to take forward.
You know, I agree, Jessica. You know, in the chamber world, we just basically call them, I mean, they do one of two things. They either do a very long, detailed annual report that they send out, or they do what we call a one pager. And this chamber has not done one yet. We're going to be planning to do it. Actually, we were going to do it this year, but with COVID, you know, you don't have as much to celebrate to necessarily put out there. And that's what these are so important for. Is there's a nonprofit that's one of our members that has been struggling with this because they're a brand new nonprofit. They don't have a year's worth of data to even show what those successes are. And so, yeah, you know, and once you have that data, it's a one-page, easy for people to look at, especially donors, because that's what they want to see. What are all these wins that you had? And even if you're established nonprofit, it's just so easy to put it on. Now we have a format that if anybody wants it as well, it's just a real easy one. You can, you know, structure it to however you want it to look and put in your own to tailor it to your organization. But yeah, they're really, really powerful.
Yep, definitely. And it doesn't have to be a website. It can just be Excel. I know a lot of places that use Excel to do their dashboarding. Excel's pretty powerful. And so that's a good inexpensive resource because you probably already have it anyway. So that's a great resource you can use to do dashboarding. A lot of folks use Tableau too, as well as another great resource to help them do some of their type dashboard type stuff as well.
Yeah, and you can definitely, you don't always need the software. We have our software system, which you guys are all can log into from the back end. It's called Chamber Master. We have a dashboard page, and the idea is it's supposed to give us all of that information in one shot, so it keeps track of. It does not do its job. So I mean, that's not why we use the database, but if you use something like that, it's all based on information, and we're not getting anything out of it that way. But yeah, it's just we basically keep track of it all ourselves, or I do, you know, via my own spreadsheets and stuff, and it's much easier, better information. So I do. It's not to say that there may not be some great software out there, but it's probably, in my opinion, the least thing we would spend money on as a nonprofit to get that done. So.
Yep.
And Jessica, thank you for this presentation. I actually do business analytics for a living. But I'm going to be very honest, on the non-for-profit side, I have analysis paralysis, because it's like, how do I share a story that is just more about sales and volume, right?
Yep.
So I myself I know we need a dashboard, but my 20 years of private sector gets in there, and I'm like, that is not what I want to tell. I don't want to just say, here's how much money came in and how much money went out.
Yep.
What are we doing with that money, and how are we transforming it? And that's where I'm having a hard time. And I don't know about you, but we're small for nonprofit. You know, we have, as I said, 18 full-time employees, 6 that are part-time. We outsource our accounting. We don't have that in home. But getting our employees to maintain the data, you know, what you say, who is responsible? It's been very hard. So for example, we just partner with a senior center to do kind of like a pen pal, where we would create cards for them, and we, you know, the center would mail them. They would quarantine them for you know, several days, and then they would give it to the people. And I talked to the teachers that they didn't take any pictures of the kids making the cards. They did not put anything on Facebook that we have mailed them. They did not contact the center to say, hey, can we have some pictures of somebody receiving them? So that would have been a great COVID story to share. But we don't have any of the information because that mindset's not there.
Right.
And that's what I'm finding hard, is like, how do we tell the story so we can get the clicks? Cute kids sending letters to grandpa?
Yes, it's perfect, right? And I think that's a problem though. A lot of nonprofits, especially maybe a little younger or less savvy, and maybe don't have that marketing person to sit there and get in their face and say, take all the pictures. Because you're like, no, because most nonprofits are not out there looking for the publicity from the look at me and look at how great we are. I mean, you want it because you need the donations, but it's just not your nature to be that way. You're giving people, and so you're looking for more. You just want to do what you do that's the feel good thing in your heart. That's what you're really after. And so, but you have to remember that you need to show people the feel good thing in your heart that's happening, because that's how you're going to get people to help you make that happen. And so asking everyone, take pictures, post to your own social medias, tag us in the social media. And that's where, I work in a business where I need clients, and we need to make, I need fees and all this, but some of the way business development, even in that world, can translate to nonprofit, because we tag the people we work with, we share posts doing things, we're out in the community. Anytime I do anything with community, I'm tagging whatever organization I work with. So whether it's Dress for Success, or when we get to take a check to Food Bank, I want to make sure people see that, hey, Food Bank's out here and they've got these great things, and we're trying to help them, but here's Food Bank and they're doing these great things. And that's the kind of stuff you need to get out there. And so don't be shy about asking for pictures. Don't be shy about asking everyone that's involved with you to post and to tag you, and to make sure that, because then you get the people that follow them and you get the people that follow you, and that's what helps get that trending stuff to pick up. So I'm not a marketing person, but that's some of the stuff I've seen work really well for some of the things that I do in the organizations that I work with. So I think that's the part maybe to get past some of that and just be willing to ask for the pictures and ask for the stories, because you're right, who wouldn't love to see cute pictures of kids writing letters and then their pen pals getting them? I mean, that's how you get people to say, oh, I want to help them. And I think that's advice for everybody.
Right. And Claudia, you missed I think it was last month or the month before, where we had the storytelling and how to be comfortable doing that. That was a fantastic one of our members. So I'll connect you with him. It's Eric Dominguez with Speak Up Stories. If you have not heard of them, he does an amazing job in helping, anybody just really tell their story. So I'm sorry you missed that. I think we have a recording of that though, don't we, Laura? We might want to send that to her or Nick. I can't remember who recorded that. But with that said, CISA has done a great job lately in getting out there and videoing and telling their story. And of course, ARL, Tom, you guys are like the experts in storytelling in your mission. So maybe go to some of their pages and see what they've been, what they do, because they do a fantastic job telling their story. And it is hard as a nonprofit, because you don't want to really boost yourself up and say, hey, look at us, we're fantastic. But in the same sense, you just have to, you have to get out there and a lot of times we have to get past that. Well, I don't want to beg for money, but you are doing that. So you have to figure out that fine point and how do we put it out there to touch that spot in them that gets them to then donate that money. So